Let's talk a little bit about the news from last Tuesday. You and I were live on Monday, and we broke down the good, the bad, and the ugly of WrestleMania. And a lot of people were disappointed in WrestleMania. That seems to be the narrative. I've seen independent people who aren't in the wrestling bubble, who have big YouTube followings, who did a whole recap of the weekend. And unfortunately, they rated WrestleMania a 4 out of 10. And it felt like the big thing he kept harping on was, when we win in the WWE world, there's a big Rock display. When John Cena turned heel, Rock was there with Travis Scott. And when Travis Scott kind of came out, we kind of assumed The Rock was still coming. That is the narrative that was out there. So a lot of people were saying, oh, The Rock ruined WrestleMania. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but that was the narrative that was out there. So then Rock goes on the Pat McAfee show. Did you see this last week, John?
I read some of the clips, yes.
So here's basically what he said. I was an advocate of that. Not turning Cody heel soon, but down the line, I like the idea of that. And this idea of way down the road, you give him a reason to turn, not based on titles, but it's his soul and what that means that affects generations. When we got to the Elimination Chamber, we were kicking ideas around, and Triple H said, what about John turning? I love it. And the next thing is you've got to speak to John and see if he loves it. John loved the idea of turning. But there's this anchor here that I want to root it in. That's a real thing I've been experiencing the past 25 years. I knew then the best thing for the final boss is we've established this thing with Cody's soul, and I don't want to be involved in that. Let the final boss step back into the shadows. Let all the spotlight go to John and Cody, not make it about Cody's soul or John's soul. Let them do what they do. I called John and Cody after the Elimination Chamber, and I said, I think the final boss's work is done. We just pulled off the greatest angle in wrestling history. I'm always here if you need me, but it's best for the final boss to not be involved in that finish. What do you make of this response? It almost feels like, I don't know, is there some political gamesmanship going on in that, or am I getting in my head?
He's saying all the right things. And I don't, you have to read his mind and somehow read between the lines, which I don't know how you can do to dispute that. I've been in situations, where, you're former champion and you have two guys that are fighting for over a title or something. And I've nearly always opted. Now Rock's a different level. So understand that, I'm not putting myself in the Rock's level, where I've always opted out or always tried to opt out of being away from the finish, where it didn't distract from what the two guys were doing for the championship, especially the guy that won the championship. Because you still got the guy you just beat out there. You don't want a bunch of extra stuff out there for people to watch. I've always opted out of being out there in big matches, of culmination things, of title changes that where I wouldn't be around. I was when we were at TNA. I was with Matt Cardona. I specifically got out of the arena because I wanted Joe Henry to be there on his own. I didn't want to be a distraction. Now, Rock's a different level, and he was a bigger part of that than what I was, that angle. But I've done a lot of stuff like that. What he's saying is all the right things. And the only way you can dispute it is to say, well, that's not what he really meant. And I don't know how you can say that. Maybe that's true, but you certainly can't prove that. All you can say is he said the right things, and I would say that that's a pretty selfless act.
I can't argue what he said. Like you said, we weren't there. We don't know. What Kevin Nash has added a little flavor to this, and I think Kevin maybe misspoke, but the narrative is out there that, well, Rock wasn't available because he was filming a movie for Martin Scorsese. Now, I don't think that filming has actually started yet. I do believe it is to come, but Kevin pointed out something pretty savvy. A few years ago, when The Rock wrestled at WrestleMania, he tore himself up pretty good, and it postponed a movie. And it cost tens of millions of dollars in rescheduling, and it was a giant hassle. And if you get a chance to work with Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese, and it's like from what I understand, like a Hawaiian mob boss, and that's the role that Rock's going to play. I'm not an actor, but I imagine it's those type of roles that you dream of as an actor. I mean, he's done all the big Avenger type stuff. He's done the superhero thing. So to now get some critical acclaim, I could see why that's a big deal. And I could also see if I was Mr. Scorsese, I would say, I'd prefer you not potentially tear some shit off the bone and us not be able to shoot you. that makes sense. Either way, though, Dave LaGreca, friend of the show from Busted Open Radio, he was not having it. And he had an absolute meltdown on Wednesday morning when discussing everything that Rock said on the Pat McAfee show on Tuesday. And The Rock felt the need to respond. And I couldn't believe this happened. But The Rock took to social media, and here's what he had to say, John. Hi, Dave. The business is a complete work. Always has been, always will be. Every aspect of it, every match, every interview. Please join me, Cody, Cena, Brian, and the rest of us for our creative discussion so you can expand on your perspective. Until then, stop ranting. It's not healthy, my friend. Enjoy the show. P.S. Tell Bubba I have Grand Marnier and Hush Puppies for all of us. I appreciate the shout out for Bubba at the end, but I don't know what to make of this. The business is a complete work, always has been, always will be, every aspect of it, every match, every interview. Let's just stop right there. Why would we say that? What's the upside to saying that, John?
It's the old call out is what it is. It's, when you want to, somebody's making a point that this is the oldest phrase in wrestling. It's a work. When people are trying to make too much sense out of something, sometimes it's a work. That's what that is. That's just an old saying in the wrestling business when you're trying to shut a guy up. It's a work. And I think that's where The Rock's coming from. What all did Dave LaGreca say? By the way, I have a lot of love for Dave LaGreca. I always call him a grumpy old bastard whenever I see him. And I mean that as a term of endearment. And he knows I do because I love him very much. What all did Dave say?
Well, he was absolutely melting down about how The Rock.
He does the best meltdowns, by the way. He's really good at it. I enjoy his meltdowns.
They're entertaining.
Yeah.
I just thought the idea that The Rock, who's on the board of TKO, coming out and saying, hey, it's all the work. It's almost like, how dare you get invested in the products we're selling? I can't believe you, who host a wrestling radio show, would have the audacity to put over, sell, respond, or acknowledge what we're doing in the it's like, don't you want guys like Dave LaGreca ranting?
100%. Back in when I started, we didn't have anybody ranting about nothing. We didn't have nobody. We got all these guys now. They get that show on Sirius that he and Bubba and Tommy do. That thing is unbelievable with ratings. It's unreal what they do. Those guys are, for one, they're all fantastic, smart guys. They can talk, but man, I think they help wrestling. I love what they do. And, Rock's more old school than me. He's third generation. So, but he sees it from a different level. He sees it from a corporate level. Triple H sees it from that too. And, people say there shouldn't be a veil at all there now. I still like the veil being there, but that's just me. But they're selling out arenas that I never dreamed of. So they're doing something right. But to me, I'm with you on this one, Conrad. I have a little bit of issue with that, but what their success that they're having is incredible. Maybe somehow that works. I don't know. I don't want to be so old school that I'm thinking that, I think I don't like it, but when it works, you may have to look at it and go, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if I am or not, but I do feel uncomfortable with stuff like that. But
follow me down this rabbit hole, because wrestling fans have decided there's more than meets the eye here. They're pointing to Triple H's 98-minute acceptance speech on the Hall of Fame night, where he thanked the guy who does his dry cleaning, the guy who cuts his grass, the guy who washes his truck, the guy who made his first pair of boots. He even gave a shout out from the stage to Eric Bischoff in the crowd. But not one time did he mention or thank The Rock. And then when you fast forward and you see this interview where he continued, as he's talking to Dave LaGreca on social, please join me, Cody, Cena, Brian, and the rest of us for our creative discussion so you can expand your perspective. And it feels like there's a pretty glaring omission there when you're talking about creative. And I'm not talking about Ed Koskey, but he should have been listed. And I'm not talking about Bruce Prichard, and he should have been listed. But Triple H isn't mentioned either. Now, considering that they just had Triple H do all the media going into this year's WrestleMania, it wasn't the main event. It was Triple H on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show and on all these major media appearances. And we saw a reveal. Not only did he reveal WrestleMania to us, he being Triple H, we also saw the reveal of, not only him going into the Hall of Fame, but the little Unreal show, the trailer where, hey, we're going to bring you inside the writer's room. And I can't help but wonder, is this a false flag operation? Are we trying to make fans say, now that we're pulling back the curtain and we're telling you what's happening in the writer's room, if we're also going to have Rock go on and say, here's exactly what happened creatively, here's who I called and when, and I'm just not mentioning Triple H. I went from thinking, man, they must really hate each other too. Is this going to turn into a match? Because it feels like this is like the inception of booking. This is the inception of kayfabe to me. Like, we're doing a story about the story behind the story, and that's the real story. But, you know, it's all a work because everything is a work. Every interview, everything Rock just said there. What do you make of this, John?
I think it's one of two things. I think, you know, obviously you've got two huge alpha males that could be posturing for position. Yes. I think that certainly is reasonable, and it happens in every corporate boardroom in the world, not just America, but in the world. I think that's normal. That if that's what's happening, I have no idea if that's what's happening. They're saying the right things. You're seeing a couple of omissions there that seem suspicious, but also, Conrad, it could be the second. And I'm more down with you on the second than I am the first. That when it's the easiest time to work people is when you're shooting with them, because all of a sudden they feel like you're letting them on the inside. You're letting them all on the inside. And then you say something that just they like, hey man, we got on the inside. They really don't like each other, and all of a sudden this is going to end up in this corporate war that culminates at maybe at Survivor Series or something. Who knows? And that'll be a shoot. So yeah, I think it could be. I think it could be the second one. I don't know that. I have no inside information, but you know, it could just be two alpha males, you know, posturing a little bit. It also could be that this is all some type of work, and if it is, it's magnificently done. Because if you're going to work this, Conrad, you got to base it upon how would you work it. You'd say everything's a work, everything's scripted, all that stuff like that. Then all of a sudden you realize there's a personal animosity here. I'm talking about the working personal animosity here between two people. It's a work. And all of a sudden now people are saying, making something out of this. And all of a sudden now you've got something down the road that you can put in the storyline and put in the ring. And by the way, the other thing that's not being mentioned, you've got the 17-time world champion out there. 17-time world champion against the young man. He's a young man to me. He's older, Cody Rhodes, who has drawn more money in the last year than probably anybody in history. With all of the revenue and everything, I'm looking at inflation dollars. I get all that. Screw that. Selling all these freaking arenas. You don't need a lot of window dressing for those guys.
I totally agree. You don't need anything else than just Cody and Cena. Even on the screen grab of last year's dry erase board from the meeting last year, where they're talking about WrestleMania this year, they had Cody and Cena. And I guess the original plan was Cena was going to turn heel at the end of WrestleMania, and they pushed it forward for the Elimination Chamber. But even that interview last week with Rock, he said something on Pat McAfee's show like, I got a call from Ari Emanuel, who's been a great close personal friend of mine and my business partner for over 20 years. And he said, Rock, we need help moving tickets. And whatever he said after that, all I heard was, well, boy, he just buried the whole damn roster when he said that. And that's when I thought, this is a work. Because normally, I just don't see how Rock would come out and say, oh, yeah, they were having trouble selling tickets, so they called me. I flew in, helicoptered in, sold it out, hanging from the rafters, biggest angle in history. And then I said, you guys got it from here. That feels like we're setting up an angle, John. It feels like it's leading to a match.
It feels like it to me, too. If you ask me why I got added to a card, and obviously I'm going to be talking half in character, half in shoot. You know,
that's right.
I will tell you every single time. That's why they had to sell some tickets. You know, they needed JBL there.
That's it. And when I said that to Jeff last week, he was almost incredulous, saying no, that he wasn't doing a wrestling promo. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, he knows.
That's exactly what I would say. Exactly. Yes. If I'm working, I don't know if they're working or not, but that's exactly what I would say.
Because here's why, and all due respect, only an asshole would say that if they weren't working. It's an asshole thing to say, which is why a heel would say it. But if you're just saying it not as a character, you are an asshole who just buried the whole roster. And when we hear The Rock talk about the young talent of today, he's almost never an asshole. Yeah. So it just feels like it's headed that direction. But if you remember, like 15 months ago, when they first did the whole WrestleMania Vegas announcement for last year's WrestleMania announcement, for what the main event was going to be, when they did it in Vegas, Super Bowl week, you recall, they rented the arena and the whole thing. Well, the following SmackDown is where Triple H came out and cut a work shoot promo talking about how, it doesn't matter. He was trolling The Rock. And that makes me think it's going to lead to that. If these guys are having a real life pissing contest and it doesn't lead to a match, that's a horse of a different color. And that is what Vince Russo thinks. Here's what Russo says. When you say, please join Cody, Cena, Bryan, and the rest of us for our creative discussions. So you're telling me right there, Triple H has no creative decisions. Thank you very much, Rock. But here's what I want to point out. People won't understand this. You'll understand this, Coach. When you're in the business and your number is called and your time is up, you know it. You know it. It's no secret, Coach. You know it. You're planning for it. You're preparing. You know it. And what you just said there, Coach, if that is what is happening, is what we are saying, I got to tell you, it's a horrible spot for Triple H to be in. So Russo believes that perhaps, hey, maybe since Bryan is his right-hand man, talking about The Rock for $7 entertainment, if The Rock wanted to place Bryan in Triple H's seat, I guess in theory, they could figure out how to make that happen. But why would you do that if you're enjoying so much success on the WWE side of things? Like, nobody says, man, business has never been better. We're at an all-time high. I think it's time for a change. Those words have never touched, right?
Yeah, this is the guy who put Viagra on a pole and had the reverse battle royal. So I think you got to set the table a little bit to see who this is that just said this. There's not a lot of credibility there. Yeah, well, to me, I agree with what you just said, Conrad. With The Rock, you got this movie coming up with Martin Scorsese. Then you come back to sold out football stadiums when you get the chance to come back. That's a pretty good gig. I don't know what you want more, which I'm not saying that he does. I don't think he does. I mean, you can't get more. You've reached the top. Like people say, well, is that really all you can get? Yeah, that's about all you can get. You've done everything. You're actually at the top of everything right now. So I don't see it. I mean, maybe it's like I say, maybe two alpha males kind of, bashing egos a little bit, but as far as somebody throwing shade at the other one, it looks like a really orchestrated angle is what it looks like.
Especially since we're talking about the new Writers Room show. Like I can't feel like that's by accident. When we're promoting that show is coming, and we're also promoting that, Triple H is saying we're going to give you a peek behind the curtain on that trailer. And then we see Rock go on a mainstream show like Pat McAfee and say, okay, here's everything that was going on behind the scenes. It feels like this is a way to have the inception of a kayfabe angle.
Right, I agree. And, people are going to take something I've said out of context, I guarantee you, in the last 15 minutes. But my main point is look, I've never seen anybody that I thought could take the place of Vince. I didn't think anybody could. The stuff that Vince does, I've been blown away by Hunter. I mean, I've watched him where he, very much like Vince. Vince would come up and say something to a talent would say something to Vince. Vince is talking to somebody else about something completely different. Then a talent comes up and talks to him about something. Vince would just change gears and compartmentalize. It's a rare trait. And Hunter has that. And I'd see Vince, he'd pause. And I would tell guys, when you get done, don't keep talking. Vince is going to pause for a minute. It's going to be uncomfortable. And then he's going to give you an answer. And I see Hunter almost do the same thing and come up with an answer that's just better than it gives you the answer that you wish you had come up with. It's the guy that asked the question in the room and goes, why didn't I ask that? Because that was the question you should ask. That's how good I think Hunter is. I don't know who in the world could do what he's done in WWE the last couple of years. I think business speaks for itself. I mean, it's a matter of, okay, we're going to judge you based upon success. You can't have much more success unless you sell out 4 arenas in one night.
I think, I hope it's an angle. It feels like an angle, but people are going to have fun talking about it no matter what.